If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Share it with your friends, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow. My name is Thomas Whitehawk, and I need to tell you about the darkest days of my life. I'm a 45-year-old ranger here in the Navajo Nation territory of Arizona, where the red rocks touch the sky and ancient spirits still whisper in the wind. Most people know me as the quiet Vietnam vet who patrols the remote canyons, but there's so much more to my story than that. I've always felt at home in these canyons, just like my father before me. He used to say that every rock, every shadow here has a story to tell. But 20 years ago, he vanished in these same lands, leaving behind only his silver medallion, which I now wear around my neck. Sometimes when I touch it, it feels warm, like it's trying to tell me something. This morning started like any other day on patrol, except something felt different. The desert, usually alive with the sounds of birds and small creatures, was eerily quiet. Even my trusted horse seemed nervous, his ears twitching at every little sound. The winter storm clouds hanging low over the canyons didn't help either. I rarely get storms like this in Arizona. As I rode past the ranger station, I couldn't help but glance at the newly discovered petroglyphs on the canyon wall. Ancient drawings that seemed to watch me as I passed by. Lately, strange things have been happening around here. Ranchers found their cattle dead in weird ways, and people whisper about shadows that move on their own. My dog, White Dog, who usually runs ahead on our patrols, stayed close to my horse today. His white fur was standing up, and he kept making low growling sounds at nothing I could see. I've learned to trust his instincts. Easing animals know things we don't. I pulled out my radio to check in with base, but all I got was static and something else. It sounded like whispers in Old Navajo, the language my grandmother used to speak. But that's impossible. He's in private channel, and nobody else should be on it. That's when I saw it. Easy made a perfect circle of dead coyotes in the sand. Their bodies weren't torn or bloody. They looked like they had just laid down and decided to die. Next to them were tracks in the sand that made my blood run cold. They started as animal prints but slowly changed into human footprints, as if something had transformed while walking. I've seen a lot of strange things in my life, both in Vietnam and here in the desert, but nothing like this. And somehow, deep in my gut, I knew this was just the beginning. The medallion around my neck felt unusually warm, like it was warning me. Little did I know that morning would be the start of a nightmare that would change my life forever. A nightmare that would finally reveal what really happened to my father and why some stories are better left untold. I rode back to my cabin that evening, my mind still stuck on those dead coyotes. White Dog wouldn't leave my side, not even to chase the rabbits he usually loves. The sun was setting, painting the canyon walls blood red, and the wind had picked up, making weird whistling sounds through the rocks. Inside my cabin, something felt off. I'm a neat person, living alone does that to you. But things weren't where I'd left them. My coffee mug was on the wrong shelf. My father's old photo was turned slightly to the left. Small things, but enough to make the hair on my neck stand up. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind outside got stronger, and I kept hearing what sounded like footsteps on my porch. White Dog sat by my bed, staring at the door and growling softly. Every time I got up to check, there was nothing there, just empty darkness and that strange rotting meat smell that seemed to come and go. I must have dozed off eventually because I woke up to White Dog barking like crazy. It was 3 a.m. Mies, what we call the dead hour. Through my window, I saw something that made my heart stop. A figure, standing in the moonlight. It looked like... No, it couldn't be. It looked exactly like my father. "Dad?" I whispered, but deep down, I knew something was very wrong. The figure just stood there, not moving, not breathing. Then it turned, and I saw its face. It was my father's face, but wrong. The eyes were completely white, like milk, and its smile was too wide, showing too many teeth. I grabbed my father's medallion, and it was burning hot against my skin. White Dog was going crazy now, barking and scratching at the door. The figure raised its hand, beckoning me to come outside. For a second, I almost did, That's how much it looked like my dad. But then I remembered what Billy Youngblood, our local medicine man, told me just last week. Evil things wear familiar faces, Thomas. They use our memories against us. I stayed inside, holding that hot medallion tight, watching as the thing wearing my father's face slowly faded into the darkness. The smell of rotting meat got stronger, then disappeared. The next morning, I found more tracks outside my cabin. They started as human footprints, then changed to something with claws, then back to human, and there, scratched into my cabin wall, was a symbol I recognized from the ancient petroglyphs, the mark of the skinwalker. I knew then that I had to talk to Billy Youngblood. If anyone knew what was happening, it would be him. But first, I had to check on Maria Redhawk, the local teacher. She'd called yesterday about strange noises around the school, and now I was worried. Really worried. What I didn't know then was that I was already caught in the Skinwalker's game, and in this game, nobody was safe. I drove to the local school early the next morning. The small building looked lonely against the desert backdrop, and Maria's car was already in the parking lot. She was always the first one there. When I walked in, Maria was sitting at her desk, her face pale. "Thomas," she said, her voice shaking, "something's not right here." She showed me the classroom walls where children's drawings hung. Every single picture showed the same thing: a tall, dark figure with white eyes. "The kids drew these yesterday," she whispered. "All of them at the same time. They said they saw it watching them during recess." Her hands were trembling as she held one of the drawings. Just then, Sheriff Martinez walked in. He's a big man who doesn't believe in ghost stories. "More weird reports, Thomas," he smirked. "First dead coyotes, now spooky drawings. This town's getting paranoid." I was about to answer when White Dog started growling at the hallway mirror. I looked, and for a split second, I saw something that made my blood freeze. Our reflections were normal, except for Maria's. It showed her face twisted into something inhuman. The lights flickered, and a cold breeze swept through the room. The smell of rotting meat returned, stronger than ever. Maria grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "It's been following me," she whispered. "Last night, it looked like my dead mother." Sheriff Martinez laughed, but I could see fear in his eyes. "I'm going to check the building," he said, walking toward the dark hallway. "This is ridiculous." "Wait," I called after him, but he was already gone. White Dog whined, pressing against my leg. The medallion around my neck grew warm again. Suddenly, we heard a scream, not quite human, not quite animal. Maria and I ran to the hallway, but Sheriff Martinez was gone. All we found was his badge on the floor, bent and twisted like it had been crushed by enormous strength. "We need to see Billy Youngblood," I told Maria. "Now," she nodded, her face white as paper. As we hurried to my truck, I saw movement in the school windows, a tall shadow, watching us leave. The drive to Billy's place was tense. Maria kept looking in the rearview mirror, and White Dog was restless in the back seat. The morning sun disappeared behind dark clouds, and the wind picked up again. "Thomas," Maria said quietly, "do you think this has something to do with your father's disappearance?" Before I could answer, something darted across the road, something that looked like a person, but moved like a spider. I slammed on the brakes, and that's when things got even worse. Our truck skidded to a stop, kicking up dust everywhere. When it cleared, the spider-like thing was gone, but White Dog was barking like crazy at the desert brush. The air felt heavy, like right before a big storm. "Look," Maria pointed at the road ahead. There stood Billy Youngblood, the old medicine man, like he'd been waiting for us. His long gray hair was blowing in the wind, and his face was serious. "Inside, quickly," he said as we pulled up. "It's not safe out here anymore." Billy's small house smelled of sage and old leather. As soon as we got in, he started drawing symbols on the doorway with white chalk. "I've been expecting you," Billy said, sitting down heavily in his old chair. "The signs are all wrong. The ravens fly backwards, the snakes hide underground, and the dead don't stay quiet." He looked straight at me. "It's happening again, Thomas, just like with your father." My hands started shaking. "What do you mean? What happened to my father?" Billy took a deep breath. Your father found something in the old burial grounds, something that should have stayed buried. Now it's awake again, and it's hungry. He pointed to my medallion. That's why he gave you that. It's protection, old magic. Suddenly, White Dog started growling at the window. Outside, the sky had turned a weird greenish color. It's getting stronger, Billy said. It feeds on fear, on memories, and it wants what your father took from it. But what did he take? I asked. Before Billy could answer, we heard it. It sounded like someone dragging nails across the walls outside. Maria grabbed my arm again. White Dog's growls turned into whimpers. Listen carefully, Billy said quickly, his voice urgent. It can wear any face, but it can't copy the eyes right, and it can't stand its own reflection. Your father knew this. That's why the lights went out. All at once, like someone had flipped a switch. In the darkness, we heard something scratching at the door. Then a voice, my father's voice, called out my name. Don't answer it, Billy whispered. Whatever you hear, don't answer. The scratching got louder. More voices joined in. Maria's mother, Sheriff Martinez. Others I didn't recognize. They were all calling us, begging us to open the door. Maria started crying quietly. White Dog pressed himself against my legs. The medallion on my chest felt like it was on fire. Then Billy said something that made everything worse. It's not just trying to get in anymore. It's already here. In the dim light from the window, I saw what he meant. Our shadows on the wall were moving wrong, twisting and stretching in ways they shouldn't. Our shadows kept twisting on the wall, like snakes dancing in firelight. Billy grabbed his sacred pouch and threw something that looked like white sand in a circle around us. Stay inside the circle, he ordered, no matter what happens. Then we heard a laugh. A horrible sound that seemed to come from everywhere. At once, Maria screamed. In the corner of the room, a dark shape began to form. It looked like smoke at first, but then it started taking shape. It became Sheriff Martinez, but wrong. His face was stretched too wide, his eyes completely white. You can't hide from me, it said in a voice that wasn't human. I've waited 20 years. I want what's mine. Billy started chanting in Navajo, his voice strong and clear. The thing that looked like Sheriff Martinez flinched back. My medallion was burning so hot now, it felt like it might melt. Suddenly, Maria gasped. Thomas, look. She pointed at Billy. In just seconds, his hair had turned completely white, and deep wrinkles were appearing on his face. Whatever he was doing to protect us was aging him rapidly. The cave, Billy said between chants, his voice getting weaker. Your father, the cave behind the old waterfall. Go. The thing laughed again, and this time the sound made the windows crack. White Dog started howling, and I felt something warm drip from my ears. Blood. Run, Billy shouted. He threw something at the creature. It looked like glowing red sand. The thing screamed, and for a moment, its shape broke apart into 1,000 dark pieces. We didn't wait. I grabbed Maria's hand and ran for the door, White Dog right behind us. As we burst outside, I heard Billy's last words. The medallion will show you the way. We jumped into my truck and I started the engine. In my rearview mirror, I saw Billy's house go dark, like something had sucked all the light out of it. Maria was crying, and White Dog was making sounds I'd never heard him make before. Where are we going? Maria asked, her voice shaking. The waterfall, I said, turning the truck toward the canyon. We need to finish what my father started. But as we drove, the sky turned black, not normal night dark, but completely black. And in that darkness, I saw shapes moving, following us. The thing wasn't done with us, not by a long shot. Then Maria pointed ahead and screamed. There, in the middle of the road, stood my father. But this time, I knew it wasn't really him. I swerved around the thing that looked like my father, driving off the road and onto the rough desert ground. The truck bounced hard as we sped toward the canyon. Maria held on tight to the dashboard, and White Dog was barking frantically from the back seat. Look at the sky, Maria shouted. The black clouds were moving in impossible ways, swirling like water down a drain. Then the rain started, but it wasn't normal rain. It was thick and dark, and where it hit the truck's windshield, it left red streaks. My medallion pulled against my neck, pointing forward like a compass. "It's showing us the way," I said, remembering Billy's last words. The old waterfall was just ahead, hidden in the darkest part of the canyon. Suddenly, White Dog started growling at the back window. I looked in the mirror, and my heart nearly stopped. Dozens of creatures were running behind us, lions, some on 2 legs, some on 4, all of them changing shape as they moved. "They're catching up," Maria screamed. She was right. The truck was struggling on the rough ground, and they were getting closer. Then we saw it, Mayas, the waterfall. Except now it was flowing backwards, up instead of down. The medallion grew so hot, it was burning through my shirt. I slammed on the brakes near the waterfall's base. "We have to run for the cave," I shouted. As soon as we got out of the truck, the creatures surrounded us. They kept shifting shapes. One moment they looked like people we knew, the next like animals, then like something from nightmares. White Dog jumped in front of us, protecting us. The medallion pulled me toward a dark opening behind the falling water. "This way." I grabbed Maria's hand and we ran. Just as we reached the cave entrance, I heard White Dog yelp. I turned to see him facing the creatures, giving us time to escape. "White Dog, come." But my brave dog stood his ground, snarling at the monsters. The last thing I saw before Maria pulled me into the cave was White Dog leaping at the creatures, fighting to save us. Inside the cave, the medallion glowed with a silver light. The walls were covered with faces, hundreds of them, pressed into the rock like masks, and there, at the very back of the cave, was something that made my blood turn to ice. In the back of the cave, we found an old wooden box with Navajo symbols carved all over it. Next to it was a leather bag and a dusty journal. My father's journal. My hands shook as I picked it up. "Thomas, they're coming," Maria whispered. The sound of scratching and growling echoed through the cave. The faces on the walls seemed to watch us, their eyes following our every move. I quickly opened the journal and read my father's last entry. "If you're reading this, son, I'm sorry. I found its heart, the source of its power. I couldn't destroy it, but I trapped it in this box. The medallion is the key. You must finish what I started." The scratching got louder. Dark shapes moved at the cave entrance. Maria grabbed my arm so tight it hurt. "Thomas, look at the walls." The faces in the rock were changing, twisting in pain. That rotten meat smell filled the air again. Then we heard that horrible laugh. The same one from Billy's house. "Give me my heart," the voice echoed. "Give it to me, or end up like your father." A tall, dark shape appeared at the cave entrance. It kept changing forms. My father, Sheriff Martinez, Billy, even White Dog. My medallion suddenly pulled itself toward the box. Without thinking, I pressed it into a small hole on top. The box clicked open. Inside was something that looked like a black stone, beating like a real heart. The creature screamed, a sound so terrible. Maria fell to her knees, covering her ear. "The mirror," Maria shouted, pointing at a puddle of water on the cave floor. "Billy said it can't stand its own reflection." I understood. I grabbed the black heart and held it over the water. The creature rushed toward us, its shape breaking apart into 1,000 pieces. "No," it shrieked. 20 years. 20 years I've waited, but it was too late." I dropped the heart into the water. The reflection showed its true form, something so horrible I still can't describe it. The creature froze, trapped in its own reflection. Then everything happened at once. The cave started shaking. The faces on the walls screamed. Maria pulled me toward the entrance. "Run." As we ran out, the cave collapsed behind us. The rain stopped. The dark clouds disappeared. In the silence that followed, I heard a distant wolf howl. It sounded like White Dog, but I knew that was impossible. We were safe, but the cost was high. Billy was gone. White Dog was gone. And now I finally knew what happened to my father. He didn't just disappear. He sacrificed himself to protect everyone. Later that night, when I looked in my bathroom mirror, I noticed something had changed. My right eye, the one that had looked into the creature's true form, had turned completely white. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I still hear whispers, and sometimes, in the corner of my eye, I see shadows moving in ways they shouldn't. Because even though we trapped it, part of the Skinwalker's evil will always be with me. My name is Marcus O'Brien, and I need to tell you about what happened in the Boundary Waters last winter. The things I saw, the horror I lived through, it still haunts me every night, but people need to know the truth. I've been a ranger up here in northern Minnesota for 12 years now. Used to be an Olympic biathlete. Before that, MIAS, which means I know my way around skis and rifles. That training saved my life, though not in any way I could have imagined. My little cabin sits deep in the woods, just me and my ham radio for company. Most folks think I'm crazy for living so isolated, but after losing my sister Sarah in these woods 15 years ago, something just kept pulling me back here. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was hope of finding answers. Now I wish I'd never stayed. It all started during the worst cold snap I've ever seen. The thermometer outside my cabin showed minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit that morning, and the weather report said it would only get colder. But that wasn't what worried me. It was the sky. MIAS, the northern lights were all wrong. Instead of their usual greens and blues, they were blood red, pulsing like a heartbeat. I was sipping my morning coffee when the radio crackled. 3 teenagers hadn't returned from their weekend camping trip. Normally, this wouldn't be too unusual. We get missing hikers all the time, but something felt different. This was the 5th disappearance this month, and it reminded me too much of other cases I'd read about, spanning back 30 years. What really got under my skin was what I'd found the day before. MIAS, one of the ancient native burial mounds, had been dug up from the inside out, like something had clawed its way out. Pete Running Bear, our local guide, had seen it too. The look in his eyes told me he knew something, but he just shook his head and muttered, "The hungry time has come again." I grabbed my gear, rifle, emergency supplies, heavy-duty winter clothing. As I stepped outside, my breath froze in the air. But something was odd about it. For a split second, I could have sworn it turned blue. That was just the beginning. I had no idea that in the next few days, I would face something that would make the coldest winter feel like a warm summer's day. Something that would make me question everything I knew about hunger, about survival, about what lurks in these ancient woods, and about what really happened to my sister Sarah all those years ago. I started my patrol that morning, skiing through the silent forest. The only sound was the crunch of my skis on the snow and my own breathing. Everything felt wrong. The woods were too quiet. Usually, you'd hear birds, squirrels, or at least some wind in the trees. But there was nothing. About 2 hours into my search, I found something that made my stomach turn. There was a deer carcass in the snow, half eaten, but it wasn't killed by wolves or bears. The bite marks were human. I've been a ranger long enough to know what animal attacks look like, and this wasn't one of them. While I was examining the deer, I heard a branch snap behind me. I turned around quickly, rifle ready, but there was no one there. That's when I noticed the trees. Someone ass or something have strange symbols into them. The weird part? The carvings seemed to have been made from the inside of the tree, like something had pushed its way out through the bark. I radioed back to base, and that's when I met Dr. Sarah Winters. She was an expert who studied local legends, and she'd come to investigate the recent disappearances. She was smart but skeptical. Woman, the kind of person who needed proof for everything. If only we knew what kind of proof we'd find. These symbols, she said, looking at my photos. They're old, really old. They're warnings about something called the Wendigo. Pete Running Bear joined us later that afternoon. He was different from usual, nervous, jumpy. My grandfather told me stories, he said quietly. When the lights turn red and the cold bites deeper than it should, the Wendigo wakes up. It brings hunger that can't be satisfied. We found an abandoned campsite just before dark. Everything was still there. MIAS backpacks, tents, even a pot of coffee on a portable stove. The coffee was still hot, steaming in the freezing air, but there was no one around, no footprints leading away. It was like the campers had just vanished. That's when I heard it, MIAS calling my name. It sounded exactly like my sister Sarah, the same way she used to call me when we were kids. But Sarah had been gone for 15 years. I knew it couldn't be her, but my heart started racing anyway. The sun was setting, and the temperature was dropping even lower. We needed to make camp, but none of us wanted to stay at the abandoned site. As we set up our tents in a different clearing, I noticed something else. All the animals seemed to be leaving the area. I saw tracks of deer, wolves, even bear, all heading in the same direction, away from where we were going. Pete looked at the tracks and whispered, "They know. The animals always know first." I tried to radio back to base that evening, but all I got was static and strange whispers. That night, as the red aurora flickered overhead, none of us slept well. We all felt it. Michael, something was watching us from the darkness between the trees. We didn't know it then, but that was our last normal night. Everything that happened after that, well, I'm still trying to make sense of it. The next morning, we woke up to even colder temperatures. Our breath made thick clouds in the air, and frost covered the inside of our tents. As we packed up, Jack Morrison, an old tracker I've known for years, showed up to help with the search. He's usually a tough guy, but even he looked worried. "Something's not right in these woods, Marcus," he said, his eyes darting around. "I've never seen the animals act like this." We split into two groups to cover more ground. I went with Dr. Winters and Pete, while Jack took a couple of local volunteers. As we hiked, the forest seemed to get quieter and darker, even though it was midday. About an hour in, we found something that made my blood run cold. 3 teenagers, the ones we were looking for, were standing in a small clearing, but they weren't moving. As we got closer, we realized they were frozen solid, like statues made of ice. Their eyes were wide open, filled with terror. Dr. Winters started examining them, trying to make sense of it. "This is impossible," she kept saying. "People don't freeze like this." Pete was praying in his native language, looking more scared than I'd ever seen him. That's when we heard the scream. It came from the direction Jack's group had gone. We ran as fast as we could through the snow, our hearts pounding. When we got there, we found the 2 volunteers, shaking and pale. "It took Jack," one of them said, his voice shaking. "Something grabbed him and pulled him into the trees. It was so fast, we searched for hours, but couldn't find any trace of Jack. It was like he'd vanished into thin air." As it got dark, we had to make camp again. Nobody wanted to, but we didn't have a choice. That night, strange things started happening. Our food tasted like ashes, no matter what we ate. We all felt hungry, even though we'd just eaten. The temperature kept dropping, way colder than it should be, even for Minnesota in winter. I tried to radio for help, but instead of reaching base, I heard voices. They sounded like the missing people, calling for help, crying. It was so real that I almost ran out into the dark to find them. Pete stopped me. "It's not real," he said, his face grim. "It's trying to lure us out." We huddled in our tents, listening to the wind howling outside, but it didn't sound like wind anymore. It sounded like something breathing, something huge. I kept my rifle close, but deep down, I was starting to think it might not be much help against whatever was out there. As I lay there, trying to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would be even worse, and I was right. The next morning brought something I'll never forget. We found Jack, but he wasn't the same person anymore. He was standing at the edge of our camp, looking thin and pale, his eyes wild and hungry. When he spoke, his voice sounded wrong, like ice cracking. "So hungry," he kept saying, over and over. "So hungry, doctor." Winters tried to approach him, but Pete pulled her back. "That's not Jack anymore," he whispered. "Look at his tracks in the snow." I looked down. Instead of normal footprints, Jack's tracks were filled with ice crystals, like frozen blood. Suddenly, a blizzard came out of nowhere. The wind was so strong it nearly knocked us over, and the snow was so thick we could barely see. We had to find shelter fast. Pete spotted an old mining shaft nearby, and we all ran for it. Inside the shaft, our flashlights showed old mining equipment and wooden support beams covered in frost. It was warmer than outside, but not by much. That's when things got really bad. Dr. Winters started shivering uncontrollably. At first we thought it was just the cold, but then we saw ice forming on her coat, it from the inside. She tried to speak, But before we could help her, she froze solid, just like those teenagers we found. The two volunteers panicked and ran back outside into the blizzard. We never saw them again. Pete started taking things out of his backpack, old bones, herbs, and a small drum. "There's only one way to stop this," he said. "My grandfather taught me the ritual," but he paused, looking scared. "Someone has to sacrifice themselves to complete it." That's when we heard it, a sound that made my whole body go cold. It was like a deer's call mixed with a human scream. Through the snow at the mine entrance, I saw something that still gives me nightmares. It was huge, maybe 15 feet tall, skinny like a starved person, with antlers covered in ice. But worst of all were its eyes, and he looked just like my sister Sarah's eyes. "Marcus," it called in Sarah's voice. "I've been waiting for you, big brother." Now I knew what really happened to my sister all those years ago, and I knew that if we didn't stop this thing, we'd all end up like Jack or worse. Pete started his ritual, beating the drum and chanting. The creature screamed, "E cuss," a sound that made the whole mine shaft shake. Ice started forming on the walls, creeping toward us. We were trapped, hungry, and freezing. And the worst part was, we were starting to look at each other like food. Pete's chanting grew louder as ice crept up the mine walls. My stomach felt so empty, it hurt, and dark thoughts kept creeping into my mind. I couldn't stop staring at Dr. Winter's frozen body, thinking terrible thoughts about food. I knew the Wendigo was playing with our minds, making us feel this horrible hunger. "Marcus," Pete said between chants, "I know what I have to do." His eyes were sad but determined. "The ritual needs a willing sacrifice, someone who gives themselves to save others." Before I could stop him, Pete walked toward the mine entrance, still chanting. The Wendigo's massive shadow loomed over him. Jack, or what used to be Jack, appeared beside the creature, his skin now stretched tight over his bones, ice forming around his feet. "No," I shouted, but Pete turned to me with a small smile. "Take care of these lands, my friend," he said. Then he threw something at me. "E cuss," a small pouch made of leather. "Sacred fire. Use it when I'm gone." Everything happened so fast after that. Pete walked straight up to the Wendigo, still singing his prayer. The creature grabbed him with its long, bony fingers. I watched in horror as Pete burst into blue flames, his last chant turning into a peaceful smile. The Wendigo screamed, "E cuss," but this time it sounded scared. I knew this was my chance. My hands shaking, I opened Pete's pouch and found old matches and some kind of powder. I struck a match, said a quick prayer, and threw both into the creature's face. Blue fire exploded everywhere. The Wendigo thrashed and howled, its icy body melting. Jack collapsed beside it, the ice in his veins turning to steam. The mine shaft filled with thick mist, and I could barely breathe. I heard my sister's voice one last time, Maya's not the monster's copy, but her real voice. "Thank you, Marcus. I'm free now." When the mist cleared, I was alone. The Wendigo was gone. Jack's body had melted away. Even Dr. Winter's frozen form had disappeared. Only Pete's drum remained covered in frost. I stumbled out of the mine into the morning light. The blizzard had stopped. The red aurora was gone. Everything looked normal again, but I knew I would never be the same. They found me 2 days later walking through the snow. I'd lost 60 pounds and my hair had turned white. The doctors couldn't explain what happened to me, but I knew that was 3 months ago. I still live in my cabin, still work as a ranger, but things are different now. I can't eat meat anymore. It makes me sick just to smell it. And sometimes, when it gets really cold, my breath still turns blue in the air. Every now and then, I visit Pete's family. His grandmother gave me a knowing look the first time I came by. "You've seen it," she said. "Now you know why we respect the old ways." I keep Pete's drum in my cabin. Sometimes, on cold nights, I swear I can hear it beating softly, keeping watch, keeping the hunger away. But the thing that scares me most, the weather report says another record-breaking cold snap is coming next week. And last night, I saw the northern lights beginning to turn red again. I've been watching the woods carefully since that night. People ask me if I want to transfer to a warmer place, somewhere with more people around, but I can't leave. Not now. I know what's out there, and someone needs to keep watch. Last week, a family of hikers came to my cabin. Their little girl pointed at the northern lights and said, "Look, Daddy, they're turning pink." I got them out of there fast, gave them some excuse about bad weather coming. They probably thought I was crazy, but I didn't care. Better to seem crazy than to let them face what I did. I keep Pete's drum next to my bed now. His family taught me some of their ways, how to spot the signs, how to protect myself. The sacred fire powder sits in a pouch around my neck, just in case. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls just right, I think about Jack, about Dr. Winters, about all the others we lost. I think about my sister Sarah too. At least now I know she didn't die alone and scared in the cold. In a weird way, knowing the truth helps, even if the truth is horrible. The other rangers notice I've changed. I don't join them for their cookouts anymore. Can't stand the smell of meat cooking. They see how I check the color of the aurora every night, how I keep extra supplies ready all the time. A few have asked me what really happened out there. I just tell them to be careful when the temperature drops too low, to never go out alone when the lights turn red. Yesterday, I found fresh symbols carved into a tree near my cabin. The hunger is waking up again, but this time I'm ready. I won't let it take anyone else. If you're ever up here in the Boundary Waters and you see the northern lights turning red, or feel a hunger that just won't go away, or hear someone you love calling from the woods, don't listen, don't follow. Come find me instead. Just look for the cabin with the drum hanging by the door, and pray you don't see my breath turning blue when I answer. My name is Frank Hawthorne, and I need to tell you about what happened in Olympic National Forest. The things I saw there, well, they still keep me up at night. I'm 42 years old, spent 12 years in Marine Force Recon before becoming a forest ranger, and I thought I'd seen it all. But nothing, not even my time in combat, could have prepared me for what I encountered during that blood moon last September. I should probably start by telling you about myself. I live alone with my teenage daughter, Emily. She's 15, smart as a whip, and the only thing I have left after losing my wife Sarah in these same woods 3 years ago. They never did figure out what really happened to Sarah that day. The official report said it was an accident, but I know better. The way we found her, no animal or fall could have done that. These days, I spend my time keeping hikers safe and finding folks who get lost in the forest. I'm good at what I do. Better than most. When other search parties give up, they call me. Maybe it's because of my military training, or maybe it's because after losing Sarah, I just can't stand the thought of another family going through that pain. But lately, things have been different in the forest. It started with the birds, dozens of them, just falling dead from the trees for no reason. Then came the missing hikers, not just 1 or 2, but 5 in the past month alone. The local tribal elder, Margaret Redfeather, she warned me about something she called the Tall One. I didn't want to believe her stories at first. I'm not much for supernatural stuff, you see, but after what I've witnessed, well, let me tell you what happened that night when the moon turned red. It was around 8 p.m. when I got the first call. I remember checking my watch because the blood moon was just starting to rise, painting everything in an eerie red glow. The radio crackled, nudged something it never usually does, and Deputy Torres's voice came through, sounding shaky. "Frank, we've got another missing hiker. Young guy, maybe 20. His friends say he went to take photos near Bear Creek and never came back." I grabbed my gear, flashlight, first aid kit, radio, and my old reliable hunting knife. Emily was doing homework in her room when I told her I had to go. "Dad, please be careful," she said, hugging me tight. "Something feels wrong tonight." She wasn't kidding. The moment I stepped into the forest, I knew something was different. You see, I've walked these trails thousands of times, but that night, the woods felt alive in a way I can't explain. The usual night sounds, owls, crickets, wind in the trees, they were all gone. Just complete silence. I headed toward Bear Creek, my flashlight beam cutting through the red-tinted darkness. That's when I found the first strange thing, and a camera lying on the ground. Not broken or dropped, but melted, like someone had held it over a fire, but only the inside was melted. The outside was cold to touch. Then I heard it, and a sound that still haunts my dreams, a child's laugh echoing through the trees. But we were miles from any homes or campgrounds, and this laugh, it wasn't right. It sounded like someone trying to copy a child's laugh without ever having heard one. I radioed Torres, "Deputy, you might want to get out here. Something's not right." His response was just static, but through that static, I could swear I heard that same horrible laugh. Looking up at the blood-red moon, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The trees about 20 feet up, beneath their branches were snapped, not broken by wind or lightning, but snapped clean, all at the same height. And on the trunk, carved deep into the bark, were symbols I'd never seen before. They were bleeding, not sap, but something dark and red, dripping down the tree like tears. That's when I knew, this wasn't going to be a normal search and rescue. Whatever was out there in the darkness, it was watching me, and it wasn't human. I took a deep breath and tried to think straight. Years of training taught me to stay calm, even when everything feels wrong. I clicked my radio again, hoping to reach someone, anyone. "This is Ranger Hawthorne. Does anybody copy?" Nothing but that weird static. As I moved deeper into the woods, my flashlight caught something that made me stop dead in my tracks. There were footprints in the mud, small ones, like a child's, but they led straight up a vertical cliff face. That's impossible, right? I've been climbing all my life, and nobody can walk straight up a rock wall like that. Then the air got cold, not normal nighttime cold, but the kind that freezes your breath and makes your bones ache. My flashlight started flickering, and that's when I saw it for the first time. Through the trees, about 50 feet away, something moved. It was tall, so tall it made the trees look small. At first I thought it was just shadows playing tricks on me, but then it changed. Its skin shifted like it was trying to match the trees behind it. The worst part? It had these long, stretched-out arms that nearly touched the ground. I've seen bears, mountain lions, every predator these woods have. But this was different. My whole body was screaming at me to run, but I couldn't move. That's when I heard Margaret Redfeather's words in my head. "When the tall one hunts, don't run. It wants you to run." A branch cracked somewhere behind me. I turned around slowly, my hand gripping my knife. There, arranged in a perfect circle, were dead animals. Rabbits, foxes, even a deer. They weren't torn up or eaten. They were just placed there, like some kind of sick display. My radio suddenly burst to life. Through the static, I heard Deputy Torres. "Frank, get out. It's not there in the trees. They're all in the..." Then the screaming started. I ran toward the screaming Mayas. That's what we're trained to do. But every step felt wrong, like I was walking through thick mud. The blood moon above made everything look like it was covered in red paint. "Torres," I shouted. "Richard, where are you?" That's when my flashlight caught something moving in the trees. It wasn't the wind. The branches were bending down, like something heavy was walking on them. I heard a crack, then a thud. About 30 feet ahead, I found Torres's radio, smashed to pieces. My hands were shaking as I picked up the radio pieces. Then I saw it, marks on the ground. Not footprints, but long, deep scratches, like something had dragged its fingers through the dirt. They led to a tree, then went straight up. I slowly lifted my flashlight beam. There, twisted around the trunk like a broken doll, was Deputy Torres. His body was bent in ways that, no, I can't even describe it. But his face was frozen in pure terror, staring at something above him. "Oh God, Richard," I whispered. He was a good man, always said I was crazy for believing in the old stories. Now, my radio crackled again. This time I heard something that made my heart stop. Emily's voice. Dad, there's something outside my window. It's so tall, I've never run so fast in my life." The thing in the trees. I could hear it following me, moving from branch to branch. That weird child's laugh, echoed all around, but now it sounded like it was mimicking Emily's voice. I had to get home. I had to get to my daughter. But deep down, I knew the horror was just beginning. My truck never felt so slow as it did that night. The whole way home, I kept seeing shadows move alongside the road, tall, twisted shadows that no trees could make. I tried calling Emily again and again, but my phone just played that awful static. When I finally pulled up to our house, something was wrong. All the lights were on, but the front door was wide open, swinging in the wind. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. "Emily," I shouted, running inside. "Emily, where are you?" Her homework was still on the kitchen table, but her chair was knocked over. There was a trail of muddy footprints leading upstairs. Not Emily's small feet, but long, stretched out marks that looked more like handprints than footprints. I took the stairs two at a time, my knife ready. Emily's bedroom door was closed, but I could hear something inside. Not my daughter's voice, but that horrible laughing sound, trying to copy her. When I pushed open the door, the window was shattered. Glass everywhere. Emily's bed was empty, but on her wall, oh God, those same symbols I'd seen bleeding from the trees were scratched deep into her wallpaper, and they were fresh. Then my phone rang. It was John Scout Williams, our most experienced park volunteer. "Frank." He was breathing hard, scared. "I found something in the old cave system near Red Feather Ridge. You need to see this. And Frank, bring Margaret. We're gonna need her help. Scout, Emily's missing. That thing took her." "I know," he said quietly. "That's why you need to come here. I think I found where it takes them." I looked at the blood moon through Emily's broken window. Whatever this thing was, it had my daughter, and I was going to get her back, no matter what it took. I picked up Margaret Redfeather first. She was already waiting outside her house, holding an old leather bag full of what she called protection items. She looked scared, and Margaret never gets scared. "The caves are its nest," she told me as we drove. "My grandmother saw it there, 50 years ago. It takes people there to change them." When we met Scout at the cave entrance, he was shaking. His usually calm face was white as a sheet. "And I found these," he said, holding up Emily's sneaker and something else. A piece of skin, but not human skin. It looked like tree bark, but it was warm and felt alive. The cave entrance was huge and dark, like a monster's open mouth. Our flashlights seemed weaker than usual, barely cutting through the darkness. The air smelled wrong, like old leaves and something rotting. "Listen," Margaret whispered. We all froze. From deep in the cave came a sound, Emily's voice, but not quite right. She was singing her favorite song, but backwards. Mixed with her voice was that awful laughing sound. Scout took the lead, then suddenly stopped. "Oh no," he gasped. The cave walls were covered in those bleeding symbols, but that wasn't the worst part. Hanging from the ceiling were cocoons, big ones, made of something that looked like spider web mixed with tree sap, and inside one of them, I could see someone moving. "Frank," Scout's voice was shaking. "Look up. There, in the darkness above us were two glowing eyes, and they were looking right at us." Everything happened so fast. The creature dropped from the ceiling, its long limbs unfolding like a spider's. Scout pushed me aside and yelled, "Run!" But before he could move, one of those long arms grabbed him. I'll never forget his scream. Margaret started chanting something in her native language, throwing some kind of powder from her bag. The creature hissed. Me is the first real sound we'd heard it make. It sounded like wind through dead trees. "Our Frank, find Emily," Margaret shouted. "I'll hold it back." I ran deeper into the cave, my flashlight beam bouncing off the wet walls. The singing was getting louder. "Emily, baby, where are you?" Then I saw her. My little girl was standing in front of a wall covered in those glowing symbols, her hand touching them like she was reading something. She didn't even blink when I called her name. "She's seeing what it wants her to see." Margaret's voice came from behind me. She was out of breath, her gray hair now completely white. "The symbols, they're a doorway. It's trying to take her through." "What happened to Scout?" I asked, afraid to hear the answer. He's gone, Margaret said quietly, but we can still save Emily. Suddenly the cave started shaking. Rocks fell from the ceiling, and there it was again. Nice, that thing standing between us and the only way out. But now I could see it clearly in my flashlight beam. Its skin was changing, trying to look like the cave walls. Those long arms reached for us, and its face, it didn't have a face, just smooth skin with those glowing eyes. Margaret grabbed my arm. There's only one way to stop it. But Frank, it's going to cost us. Margaret pulled out an old knife with strange carvings on it. The ritual needs blood, she said. Blood from someone who loves Emily more than life itself. The creature was getting closer. Its long fingers scraped against the cave walls, making a sound like nails on a chalkboard. Emily still hadn't moved, her eyes fixed on those glowing symbols. When I start the ritual, Margaret explained quickly, it will try to stop us. You must protect Emily, no matter what. And Frank, once I start, I can't stop, even if it kills me. She started chanting again, louder this time. The knife in her hand began to glow red, just like the blood moon outside. The creature screamed, "Nice," a sound so horrible it made my ears bleed. I ran to Emily, wrapping my arms around her. The thing reached for us with those endless arms, but Margaret threw more of that powder, creating a circle around us. The creature couldn't cross it, but I could see the circle starting to fade. "Now, Frank," Margaret shouted. "Your blood on Emily's forehead." I grabbed the glowing knife and cut my palm. The pain was like fire. As I pressed my bleeding hand to Emily's forehead, Margaret's chanting reached a fever pitch. The cave walls were shaking harder now, and the creature, it was changing. Its body was twisting, growing larger. Then Emily screamed. Not like before, mice. This was my daughter's real voice. Her eyes cleared up, and she grabbed onto me. "Daddy?" But when we looked at Margaret, my heart stopped. She was aging right in front of us. Her hair turned white as snow. Her skin wrinkled and dried like old paper. The creature lunged at her, and the creature grabbed Margaret with both its long arms. She didn't even try to run. She just kept chanting, her voice getting weaker as her body aged years and seconds. The symbols on the cave walls were glowing brighter and brighter, pulsing like heartbeats. "Close your eyes, Emily," I shouted, holding her tight. But I couldn't look away. Margaret's last words were in English. "Finish it, Frank," the knife in its heart. The creature lifted her up, and I can't describe what it did to her. But in her last moment, Margaret smiled. She knew something we didn't. Suddenly the knife in my hand pulled like a magnet toward the creature. Emily grabbed my arm. "Dad, I can see it. I can see where its heart is." The thing that my daughter saw, Nishi still can't talk about it. But she pointed to a spot on the creature's chest where its skin looked like swirling darkness. I didn't think. I just moved. The creature was focused on Margaret, and I had one chance. I ran forward and jumped, pushing the glowing knife deep into that dark spot. The scream it made, it shook the whole cave. The creature dropped Margaret's body and started to fold in on itself, like it was being sucked into something we couldn't see. But one of its arms caught my left hand as it disappeared. The pain was worse than anything I'd ever felt. When it was over, my hand was just gone, like it had never been there. Emily ran to me, crying. The cave was quiet now, the symbols stopped glowing. And Margaret, she looked peaceful, like she was sleeping, but she was gone. We made it out of the cave just as the sun was rising. The blood moon was gone, but things would never be the same. My left hand was just a stump now, and Emily, she was different. The police found Deputy Torres's body in the tree, and Scout's remains in the cave. They also found 3 other missing hikers, still in those strange cocoons, but they were already gone. Their bodies looked like they'd been there for years, even though some had only been missing for days. They tried to explain it all away. Chi blamed it on a bear, or maybe a mountain lion. But we knew the truth. The forest had changed. The trees never stopped bleeding that red sap where the symbols had been. And sometimes, late at night, you can still hear that awful laughing sound. Emily has nightmares now. She says she sees things in mirrors, mass shadows that shouldn't be there, moving when nothing's moving. And sometimes she writes those strange symbols without even knowing she's doing it. I still work as a ranger, even with one hand. Someone needs to keep people safe, to warn them about the places they shouldn't go. The caves are sealed now, but I know that's not the end. Last week, Emily looked at me during breakfast and said something that chilled my blood. Dad, it's not gone, it's just sleeping, and it's not the only one. I don't know what's worse, knowing that thing is still out there somewhere, or knowing that there are more of them. All I know is, when the blood moon rises again, I'll be ready. But sometimes, when I'm alone in the forest at night, I swear I can feel it watching me. And my missing left hand, it still itches, especially when the moon is full. The strangest part, every full moon, Emily draws pictures of what she sees in her mirrors. Last night, she showed me her latest drawing. It was that creature, but this time it had my missing left hand, still clutching that carved knife Margaret gave us. The hand in the drawing was pointing to next month's blood moon date on our calendar. Yesterday, I found fresh symbols carved into our backyard tree. They were bleeding that same red sap, but these symbols were different. Emily says they're a warning. She says more creatures are waking up, not just in our forest, but in forests everywhere. Margaret's granddaughter visited us last week. She gave me her grandmother's old leather bag, saying, "She wanted you to have this. You'll need it soon." Inside the bag, I found a note in Margaret's handwriting. The ritual didn't end that night, Frank. It only began. I look at my daughter now, watching her check every mirror in our house before going to bed. She's stronger than I am. She can see things I can't, and I know that someday those things will come back for us. So if you're ever in Olympic National Forest and you hear children laughing when there shouldn't be any children around, run. Run as fast as you can, because we're not the hunters anymore. We're the hunted. My name is Paul Davidson, and I've been a ranger at Red Creek Valley for nearly 2 decades now. At 51, you'd think I'd have seen everything these woods could throw at me. But what happened last November changed everything I thought I knew about nature, about animals, and most importantly, about survival. I live alone in the fire tower that overlooks the northern Michigan wilderness. Well, not completely alone. I have Rex, my German Shepherd, who's been my loyal partner for the past 3 years. Before Rex, I had another police dog partner, Max. But, well, that's a story that still keeps me up at night. Let me tell you what happened that strange autumn evening. The sky was putting on quite a show with a rare meteor shower, painting streaks of blue and green across the dark canvas above. I was sitting in my tower, sipping hot coffee, 5 years sober now, and I'm proud of it, with Rex curled up at my feet. Everything seemed normal, just another quiet night watching over the valley, but then Rex's ears perked up. Now, I've worked with dogs long enough to know when something's not right. He didn't bark or growl, he just stood there, stiff as a board, staring out into the darkness. That's when I heard it, a howl that made my blood run cold. I've heard plenty of wolf howls in my time, but this was different. It sounded almost human, like someone trying to scream and howl at the same time. I grabbed my flashlight and radio, checked my gun more out of habit than anything else, and headed down the tower steps with Rex close behind. Little did I know, this would be the beginning of the most terrifying month of my life. You see, Red Creek Valley has always had stories, old tales about missing hunters, strange lights in the abandoned mines, and something the locals call the Packmaster. I never paid much attention to those stories before. Being an animal behaviorist and former K9 unit handler, I always believed there was a logical explanation for everything. But what I was about to discover in those woods would prove me wrong. Very wrong. Rex whined softly beside me as we reached the ground, his tail low and his body tense. I patted his head trying to reassure him, but I could feel it too. Something in the air had changed. The forest felt different, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. "It's okay, boy," I whispered, but even I didn't believe my own words. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing the familiar path ahead of us. But somehow, even these trails I knew like the back of my hand seemed strange and threatening that night. That's when we found the first sign that something was terribly wrong in Red Creek Valley. Something that would make me question everything I knew about the natural world and force me to face horrors I never thought possible. But let me start from the beginning, from what we found in the clearing that night. Because once you hear this story, you'll never look at the woods the same way again. As Rex and I walked deeper into the woods, my flashlight beam caught something that made me stop in my tracks. There, in a small clearing, lay a wolf, or what was left of one. In my 20 years as a ranger, I'd seen plenty of dead animals, but this was different. The wolf hadn't been killed by another animal. Its wounds were strange. What really sent chills down my spine were the teeth marks. They looked human. I pulled out my phone to take pictures and called Dr. Helen Morris, our local vet. Helen and I had worked together many times before when we found injured animals. She's smart, no nonsense, and doesn't scare easily. But when she arrived at the scene 30 minutes later, even she looked worried. "Paul, I've never seen anything like this," she said, kneeling beside the wolf. Her flashlight moved over the bite marks. "These aren't from any animal I know." Rex, who was usually calm around dead animals, started acting weird. He kept looking into the darkness and making small whimpering sounds. Then I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. A trail of footprints in the soft mud. They started as wolf paw prints, but then they changed. The last few prints looked like human footprints, but bigger than any I'd ever seen. "Helen, look at this," I said, pointing my flashlight at the tracks. She stood up slowly, her face going pale. "We should report this," she said quietly. "Something's not right here." Just then, we heard it again. That same horrible howl from earlier, but closer this time. Rex pressed against my leg, trembling. The howl didn't sound like a wolf anymore. It sounded like someone in pain, someone trying to speak. I reached for my radio to call it in, but all I got was static and a strange, low growling sound coming through the speaker. Through the static, I could have sworn I heard words, actual words, but that was impossible, right? Helen grabbed my arm. "Paul, we need to go, now." As we hurried back toward the tower, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The trees seemed to close in around us, and every shadow looked like it was moving. Even the air felt wrong. Fall heavy and thick, with a strange smell I'd never noticed before. Back at the tower, I made Helen some coffee while she looked through her medical books. Rex wouldn't leave my side, and he kept staring out the windows into the darkness. "Paul," Helen said finally, "remember those stories Chief Running Wolf tells about the Packmaster?" "Those are just stories," I said. But even as I said it, I wasn't so sure anymore. "Maybe," she replied. "But tomorrow, I think we should talk to him. And Paul." She paused, looking at me seriously. "Be careful. Whatever did this isn't normal." After Helen left, I sat in my tower, watching the forest. The meteor shower had stopped, but the sky still seemed strange. Too red for this time of year. Rex lay at my feet, but he wasn't sleeping. Every few minutes, his ears would prick up at sounds I couldn't hear. I thought about Max, my old canine partner, who disappeared in these same woods 3 years ago. At the time, I thought he'd just run off or been killed by wolves. Now, I wasn't so sure. What if his disappearance was connected to what was happening now? As the night grew darker, more howls echoed through the valley. But these weren't wolf howls anymore. They were something else, something that made Rex hide under my desk and made me check my gun more times than I'd like to admit. Something was out there in the darkness, something that shouldn't exist, and I had a feeling this was just the beginning. The next morning I drove to the reservation to meet Chief Running Wolf. He's an old man now, probably in his 70s, but his eyes are still sharp and alert. I've known him for years, but I'd always politely ignored his warnings about the forest's dark secrets. Now, I needed to listen. I told him everything Min is about the mutilated wolf, the strange footprints, and those horrible howls. Rex sat quietly in my truck. He refused to get out when we arrived, which wasn't like him at all. The chief didn't look surprised. Instead, he walked into his house and came back with an old leather book. "I've been waiting for someone to come ask about this," he said, his voice heavy. "The signs are all here. The red sky, the meteor shower, the changed animals. It's happening again, just like in 1947. He opened the book and showed me old black and white photos. My hands started shaking when I saw them. They showed the same kind of wolf carcasses we'd found, the same strange footprints. But what really got me was a blurry picture of something standing in the trees. It was tall, maybe 9 feet, and even in the grainy photo, I could see it wasn't human or wolf, but somehow, both. "We call it the Packmaster," the chief said quietly. "It comes when the sky bleeds and the stars fall. It takes the wolves first, then the dogs, then," he paused, looking at me seriously, "then it comes for people." Just then my phone rang. It was Mike Peterson, a local hunter I knew well. His voice was shaking. "Paul, you need to come to my place right now. It's about my dog, Buck. Something's wrong with him." I thanked the chief and hurried to Mike's house. What I found there made my stomach turn. Buck, Mike's friendly old hunting dog, was acting completely different. His eyes had a strange yellowish glow, and he was snarling at Mike, his owner of 12 years. But worse than that were his teeth. They were changing, growing longer before our eyes. "He's been like this since last night," Mike said, keeping his distance from the cage where he'd locked Buck. "And look at his paws." Buck's paws were stretching, becoming more like hands. I remembered what the chief had said about it, starting with the dogs, and my thoughts went straight to Rex. I had to get back to him. But before I could leave, we heard a commotion outside. Other dogs in the neighborhood were barking, but their barks were turning into something else, something that sounded more and more like words. Mike's face went white. "Paul, what's happening to our dogs?" I grabbed my radio to call for backup, but like last night, all I got was that strange growling static. Through it, I clearly heard words this time. "Coming. We're coming." Looking out Mike's window, I saw dogs gathering in the street. Their shapes were changing, growing larger, more human-like, and their eyes, all of them had that same yellowish glow. "Mike," I said slowly, "get your gun and get in my truck. We need to leave. Now." As we backed out of his driveway, I couldn't help thinking about Rex, alone in my truck at the reservation. I pressed the gas pedal harder, praying I wasn't too late. We raced back to the reservation, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Mike kept looking in the side mirror, watching for any signs we were being followed. The sky was getting darker, even though it was only mid-afternoon, and that strange reddish color was getting stronger. When we got to the chief's place, my heart nearly stopped. My truck door was open, and Rex was gone. There were scratch marks on the seat, and a trail of those half-wolf, half-human footprints led into the woods. "Rex," I shouted, not caring if anything else heard me. "Rex, come here, boy." The chief came running out. "Inside, both of you." Now, there was real fear in his voice, something I'd never heard before. Once inside, he locked all the doors and started placing strange-smelling herbs on the windowsills. "Your dog," he said. "Was he acting strange this morning?" I thought about it. Rex had been quieter than usual, and his eyes, I hadn't wanted to notice it, but they had started to look different. More yellow. "He's changing," the chief said softly. Like the others. My phone rang, making us all jump. It was Helen. "Paul," she sounded out of breath. "You need to see this. I'm at my clinic. The test results from that wolf, they're impossible. The DNA is changing, mutating, and all the dogs I'm treating, they're showing the same changes. You have to." The line went dead. "We have to help her," I said, reaching for the door. But the chief grabbed my arm. "Listen," he said. In the distance, we could hear howling. But it wasn't like before. It was closer, clearer, and mixed with human voices. They were calling my name. Mike looked at me, his face pale. That sounded like Buck. The chief pulled out an old wooden box. Inside were bullets that looked like they were made of silver. "These were passed down from my grandfather," he said. He faced this evil in 1947. Not many survived. What happened to the others? Mike asked. They became part of the pack, the chief answered. Forever. Suddenly we heard scratching at the door. A familiar whine made my heart ache. Rex? I called out. Paul, help me. The voice was twisted, but I knew it was Rex. My dog was talking. Mike raised his rifle, but I stopped him. He's still my dog. Not anymore, the chief warned. Look. Through the window, I could see Rex's shadow. He was standing on two legs, his body twisted and changed. But what broke my heart were his eyes. Still Rex's eyes, but filled with a horrible yellow light. And behind him, more shapes emerged from the woods. Dozens of them. Changed dogs, wolves, and something bigger. Something that made even Rex look small. The pack master had come. We were trapped, and night was falling. The scratching at the door got louder, and Rex's voice became more human with each word. Paul, let me in, please. It hurt to hear him like that, begging. But I knew it wasn't really Rex anymore. We need to get to Helen, I said, trying to think clearly. She might have found something that could help us understand what's happening. The chief moved quickly to a back room and returned with an old map. There's a tunnel, he whispered, pointing to a drawing on the yellowed paper. The tribes used it long ago. It leads to the old mine, and from there we can reach the town without being seen. Just then, something huge slammed against the front door. The whole house shook. Through the window, I saw it, Myas the packmaster. It was even more terrifying than in the old photo. 9 feet tall, standing on two legs like a man but covered in dark fur. Its eyes glowed red, different from the yellow eyes of the other. When it opened its mouth, I saw rows of teeth that looked like they could tear through steel. The back door, the chief whispered urgently. Now, we crept through the house as quietly as we could. Behind us, the front door began to crack. Mike was shaking so bad he could barely hold his rifle. I loaded the silver bullets the chief had given me into my gun, praying they would work if we needed them. Just as we reached the back door, we heard Helen scream. It came from somewhere in the forest, close by. She must have tried to reach us, Mike said. I knew we had to help her, but the packmaster and its changed animals were between us and where the scream came from. The chief pulled up an old rug, revealing a trap door. This tunnel will take you near the clinic, he said. I'll distract them. No, I protested. They'll kill you. The old man smiled sadly. My time was coming anyway. Save your friend, save our town. He pressed something into my hand, a small pouch of herbs. Burn this if they get close, it will give you time. Before we could stop him, the chief walked to the front door and started chanting in his native language. The creatures outside growled in response. Mike and I slipped into the tunnel, closing the trap door just as we heard the front door of the house finally break open. The chief's chanting turned into a scream, and then silence. The tunnel was dark and narrow. We used our phone lights to see, trying not to think about what had just happened above us. Water dripped somewhere ahead, and our footsteps echoed off the stone walls. Paul, Mike whispered, what if we find Helen and she's changed? I didn't answer. I couldn't, because right then, we heard something in the tunnel ahead of us. Footsteps, and they weren't human. The beam of my flashlight caught a glimpse of yellow eyes in the darkness, and behind them, more eyes, dozens of them. They had found another way in. My hands shook as I pulled out the pouch of herbs the chief had given me. Mike, your lighter, I whispered. He fumbled in his pocket and handed it to me. The yellow eyes were getting closer, and now we could hear their claws clicking on the stone floor. I lit the herbs and threw them toward the eyes. A thick, sweet-smelling smoke filled the tunnel. The creatures howled, not in pain but in confusion. Through the smoke, I saw them backing away, shaking their heads like they were dizzy. Run, I shouted. We turned and ran the other way, not caring how much noise we made. The tunnel split in 2 directions. Which way? Mike gasped. Before I could answer, we heard Helen's voice echoing from the right tunnel. Help. Somebody please. She sounded human, normal, scared. We ran toward her voice and found ourselves in a wider cave area. My flashlight beam showed old mining equipment and wooden supports. Helen was there, crouched behind some old barrels. She looked okay. No yellow eyes, no changes. Paul, Mike, thank God, she said, running to us. Those things, they chased me into the mines. I've been hiding for hours. We need to get out of here, I said. The chief, he's gone. And Rex, my voice broke a little, saying his name. Helen grabbed my arm. Paul, I know what's causing this. The meteor shower. It brought something with it. Some kind of virus or infection that's changing the DNA of canines. It's spreading to humans who get bitten. I found it in my tests, but then my lab computers crashed and She stopped suddenly, her eyes wide with fear. Behind us we heard a familiar whine. I turned slowly. There was Rex, standing on two legs. His fur matted and his body twisted into something horrible. But his eyes, for just a second, I saw my old friend in there, fighting whatever he'd become. Paul, Rex's voice was rough but clear. Run. He's coming. The tunnel filled with a deep growl that shook loose rocks from the ceiling. The Packmaster stepped into view, its massive form blocking the tunnel behind Rex. But what made my blood freeze wasn't its size or its glowing red eyes. Around its neck was a torn, faded collar, one I recognized, one I'd bought years ago, for my old K9 partner Max. No, I whispered.
It can't be.
The Packmaster Max smiled with too many teeth. Partner, it growled. Finally, together again. My mind was spinning. Max, my old partner, the dog I'd searched for all those years, was the Packmaster. He'd been here all along, changing, becoming this thing. We have to move, Helen whispered urgently. There's another tunnel behind those barrels. It leads to my clinic. But I couldn't move. I was staring at what used to be Max, remembering all those days we worked together, all those nights I spent searching for him after he disappeared.
You left me.
Max growled, taking a step forward. His voice was deep and horrible, but I could hear pain in it. You stopped looking. I never stopped, I said, my voice shaking. I searched for months. Rex suddenly jumped between us, still changed but somehow fighting against it. Paul, he snarled, struggling to stay on his feet. Can't control it much longer. Mike grabbed my arm and pulled me back. Helen was already moving the barrels, revealing a small tunnel entrance. The Packmaster Max let out a roar that shook the whole cave. Other creatures started pouring in behind him. Rex, come with us, I shouted, but Rex shook his twisted head. Too late. For me, he growled. Save others. Then Rex lunged at Max, giving us time to escape. The sounds of their fight echoed through the tunnel as we ran. I heard yelps and growls, then a horrible cry that could have been Rex or Max. I couldn't tell anymore. We ran until our lungs burned. Helen's clinic was just ahead. We could see light through a crack in the rock. But when we got inside, things were even worse. The clinic was filled with changed dogs, some fully transformed, others still changing. They were breaking out of their cages, their eyes glowing yellow, and in the corner, trapped behind a desk, was Mike's dog Buck. Dad, help me, Buck whimpered, his voice a horrible mix of dog and human. Mike raised his rifle, tears in his eyes. Don't make me do this, Buck, please. But Buck's eyes were already turning yellow. His body started twisting, growing. He wasn't Buck anymore. I grabbed the silver bullets from my pocket. Mike, Helen, Max, get to the roof. Now. What about you? Helen asked. I'm ending this, I said, loading my gun. Max was my partner. This is my responsibility. Behind us, the tunnel exploded with noise. The Packmaster was coming, and he was bringing his whole pack with him. I could hear Max's voice getting closer. You can't stop this, Paul. Join us. Become part of the pack. I raised my gun, aimed at the tunnel entrance, and waited. Sometimes, to save what you love, you have to be ready to lose everything. The Packmaster burst through the tunnel first, his massive form filling the doorway. Behind him, dozens of changed creatures poured in, including what was left of Buck. But I couldn't see Rex anywhere. Last chance, partner, Max growled, his red eyes glowing brighter. Join us willingly." I aimed my gun straight at him. "You're not Max anymore. Max would never hurt innocent people." He laughed, a horrible sound that was half howl, half human. "I'm better than Max now. Stronger. And after tonight, this whole valley will be ours." That's when I saw movement behind him. Rex, badly hurt but still fighting, crept up silently, even changed. He was still a police dog at heart, remembering all our old training. "You forgot something, Max," I said, trying to keep his attention. "A good police dog never betrays his partner." Rex jumped, sinking his teeth into Max's neck. At the same time, I fired the silver bullets. The sound was deafening in the small clinic. Max howled, a sound of pain and rage that shattered all the windows. "Now," I shouted to Helen and Mike. They started throwing the herbs the chief had given us, creating clouds of smoke everywhere. The changed creatures panicked, running into each other in confusion. Max stumbled backward, silver bullets in his chest. His red eyes started to fade. He looked at me one last time, and for a second, I saw my old partner in there, scared, hurt, and finally free. "Thank you," he whispered, before falling. The other creatures, seeing their leader down, started changing back. Some died, others passed out. Buck collapsed in Mike's arms, slowly turning back into a regular dog. Rex lay on the floor, his body trembling. I ran to him, cradling his head. He was changing too, but something was wrong. "Paul," he said weakly, his voice becoming more dog-like again. "Did we win?" "We did, boy. We did." I was crying now. "Just hold on." But Rex's eyes were closing. He'd fought too hard, been changed too long. He licked my hand one last time, and went still. Dawn was breaking outside. The red sky was fading back to normal. Helen checked the survivor. Some would make it, others wouldn't. The town would never be the same. I buried Rex next to the fire tower, where he'd spent his happiest days. I buried Max too, remembering him as he was, not what he became. But sometimes, on full moons, I feel a strange itch under my skin. One of Max's bites got me during the fight. Helen helps me manage it with silver nitrate injections, but we both know it's just buying time. And on those nights, when the moon is bright and full, I climb my tower and look out over Red Creek Valley. I can sense others out there, changed but fighting it like I do. And sometimes, just sometimes, I howl with them, remembering Rex, Max, and the night everything changed. Because once you've been marked by the Packmaster, you're never really free. You just learn to control it, one full moon at a time. My name is Catherine Sullivan, but everyone calls me Kate. I never thought I'd come back to Echo Lake, not after what happened to my twin brother Michael 20 years ago, but here I am, living in my old family cabin, watching the same dark waters that took him from me. I'm 35 now, and I've spent most of my life trying to save others from drowning. Funny how life works, isn't it? That terrible day turned me into a search and rescue specialist. I've solved dozens of impossible drowning cases across the country, but Echo Lake, this place is different. It always has been. The locals say the Native Americans never built villages near these shores. They called this place the waters between worlds and warned about spirits they called those who walk between. I used to think these were just stories to scare children away from the deep water. Now, I'm not so sure. I moved back here 3 months ago, bringing my rescue boat and all my equipment. My little cabin sits right at the water's edge, and from my window I can see the old lighthouse where George Fisher still keeps watch. He's the only one who's been here longer than the stories themselves. The lake looks peaceful most days, but that's what makes it so dangerous. People don't understand how many lives it has claimed. Even on the calmest days, there's something about the water here, something that doesn't follow the rules of nature. Last night, I had that dream again. The same one I've been having since Michael disappeared. I'm underwater, but I can breathe. There are lights in the depths, forming patterns I almost recognize. And there's a voice, Michael's voice, calling me from somewhere I can't reach. But this time, something was different. When I woke up, the lake was covered in a strange fog that moved against the wind, and in the early morning light, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Footprints, leading out of the water and disappearing into thin air. I know what you're thinking. I've asked myself the same questions 1,000 times. Am I crazy? Am I seeing things? But after 20 years of searching for answers, I've learned one thing. Sometimes the truth is stranger than any story you could make up. And now, as October brings its strange weather to Echo Lake, I can feel something changing. The water is darker, the fog thicker, and the reflections, sometimes they show things that aren't there. Or maybe they're showing things that are more real than what we can normally see. I've got my flashlight, my diving gear, and my old case files. Something is happening at Echo Lake, and this time, I'm going to find out what really lives in these waters. Even if it means facing the truth about what happened to Michael all those years ago. This is my story, and I promise you, every word of it is true. It started on a chilly October morning. I was making coffee when I noticed something odd about the lake. The water had turned black in perfect circles, like someone had dropped ink into it. But these circles weren't spreading midas, they just stayed there perfectly round and still. I grabbed my phone to call Officer Mark Reynolds, the local cop who's been helping me investigate the strange things happening here. Mark's a good guy, kind of like the big brother I lost. He's one of the few people who doesn't think I'm crazy when I talk about the weird stuff I see at the lake. "Kate, you need to see this," he said before I could even tell him about the black circles. "There's something at the old pier." When I got there, I found Mark staring at the water, his face pale. Lisa Martinez, a teenage girl who works at the lakeside store, was with him. She was shaking, pointing at something in the water. "Tell her what you saw, Lisa," Mark said quietly. Lisa's voice trembled as she spoke. "I was opening the store early this morning when I heard voices coming from the lake. Like people talking underwater. But when I looked, there was nobody there." Then, she stopped, taking a deep breath. "Then what?" I asked gently. "Then I saw someone's backpack floating on the water. But not just floating, Mies. It was standing straight up, like someone was wearing it. But there was no one there, Miss Sullivan. Just the backpack, standing on the water, like it was on solid ground." I walked to the edge of the pier and looked down. The backpack was gone now, but one of those black circles was right there, perfectly round in the morning light. As I watched, a fish swam through it, and froze, its scales turning crystal clear like glass. But it was still alive, its eyes moving, looking right at me. "Mark," I called out, "remember those stories old George told us, about the things that live in the fog?" Mark nodded slowly. "The mist walkers. But those are just stories, Kate, right?" Before I could answer, we heard it, "Mies," a sound like whispers coming from the middle of the lake. The fog was rolling in, but something was wrong. It was moving in straight lines, making shapes I'd never seen fog make before. "Everyone, get back from the water," I said, my rescue training kicking in. But as we stepped back, I saw something that made my heart stop. Footprints appearing on the pier, one after another, coming from the lake. But there was nobody there making them. The footprints kept coming, walking right past us, and then they continued into the air, several feet above the pier, before disappearing into the fog. Lisa grabbed my arm. "Miss Sullivan, what's happening to our lake?" I wished I could tell her it was just tricks of the light or her imagination, but I knew better. After 20 years, the lake was finally showing us what it had been hiding, and somehow, I knew this was just the beginning. "I don't know, Lisa," I said, watching the fog twist into impossible shapes, "but I'm going to find out." That afternoon, Dr. Patricia Yang arrived at Echo Lake. She's a scientist who studies weird water behavior, and Mark had called her after what we saw at the pier. She didn't look like your typical scientist, just a woman in rain boots and a warm jacket carrying a bag full of testing equipment. "These readings don't make any sense," she said, frowning at her devices. "The water temperature changes every few seconds. And look at this." She dropped a small piece of paper into one of the black circles. Instead of getting wet and sinking, it stood straight up, just like the backpack had. We were talking about the tests when old George Fisher came hurrying down from his lighthouse. I'd known George since I was a kid. He's in his 70s now, with white hair and kind eyes that have seen too much. "You've seen them, haven't you?" he asked, his voice shaking. "They're coming back, just like they did 20 years ago." My heart skipped a beat. 20 years ago, when Michael disappeared. George nodded slowly. I should have told you this long ago, Kate. That night, when your brother vanished, I saw something from the lighthouse. There were people walking on the water, but they weren't really people. They were made of mist, and where they stepped, the water turned to crystal. Dr. Yang looked skeptical, but I saw her write something in her notebook. Mr. Fisher, are you saying there are creatures living in the lake? Before George could answer, we heard a scream from the water. A group of teenagers had been swimming near the shore, and now one of them was pointing at something in the water. We ran to the beach. The fog was rolling in again, but this time it was different. It was forming shapes like bridges and stairs, rising up from the water. And there, walking on one of these fog bridges, we saw a figure. It looked human, but it was hard to focus on. Michael's like trying to look at smoke. Where it walked, the fog turned solid, leaving behind traces of crystal that sparkled in the fading light. Everyone, get back, I shouted, but I couldn't move, because the figure had turned to look at me, and even through the mist, I recognized that face. It was older, but I'd know it anywhere. It was Michael's face. Kate. Mark's voice seemed far away. Kate, we need to get these kids out of here. But I couldn't take my eyes off the figure. It raised its hand, and suddenly all our reflections in the water changed. Instead of showing us standing on the beach, they showed another world, as a city made of crystal under the lake's surface. Then the figure spoke, and its voice was both Michael's and not Michael's. The doorway is opening, sister. They're all coming back. The fog surged forward like a wave, and in the chaos that followed, 2 of the teenage swimmers disappeared. We found their clothes later, perfectly dry, standing upright on the water. That night, as police boats searched the lake, I sat in my cabin looking at old photos of Michael and me. I knew now that finding my brother wasn't just about closure anymore. Something was happening at Echo Lake, something that had started 20 years ago, and somehow, Michael was part of it all. The next few days were a blur of activity. More people went missing, and strange things kept happening around the lake. Dr. Yang set up a small lab in my cabin, filling it with beeping machines and jars of lake water. Officer Reynolds was always on his radio, talking to search teams and worried families. One evening, as the sun was setting, I decided to take my boat out. I needed to clear my head and maybe get a closer look at those black circles in the water. Dr. Yang came with me, carrying a special camera to take pictures under the water. As we drifted into the middle of the lake, the fog started to roll in again. It was thick and moved in weird ways, sometimes forming shapes that almost looked like faces. Kate. Look. Dr. Yang pointed at the water. The black circles were glowing now, giving off a soft blue light. It was beautiful, but also scary. Suddenly our boat jerked to a stop. It felt like we had hit something, but there was nothing around us but water and fog. We should go back, I said, feeling uneasy. But when I tried to start the engine, nothing happened. We were stuck. Then we heard it, Maya's voices, coming from under the water. They sounded like whispers at first, but got louder and louder. I recognized one of the voices. It was Michael's. Kate, it said, come home. The water around our boat began to swirl, forming a whirlpool, but instead of pulling us down, it started to rise up, like a water tornado. Hold on, I yelled to Dr. Yang. We grabbed onto the sides of the boat as the water lifted us higher and higher. Through the walls of the water funnel, we could see flashes of another world, crystal buildings, strange creatures, and people who looked like they were made of mist. Just when I thought we were going to be pulled into that other world, the water fell away. Our boat splashed back onto the lake's surface. We were soaked and shaking, but alive. As we caught our breath, I saw something floating in the water next to our boat. It was a small crystal, glowing with the same blue light as the circles. When I picked it up, it felt warm in my hand. What just happened? Dr. Yang asked, her voice shaky. I looked at the crystal, then at the fog that was slowly fading away. I think, I said slowly, we just got a glimpse of where the missing people have gone, and I think my brother is trying to tell us something. As we headed back to shore, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Not just by the mist or whatever lived in the lake, but by Michael himself. I knew then that to solve this mystery and save the missing people, I would have to do something I'd been afraid to do for 20 years. I would have to go into the lake and find my brother. The next morning, I called a meeting at my cabin. Officer Reynolds, Dr. Yang, Old George, and Lisa were all there. I showed them the glowing crystal from last night. I'm going to dive into the lake, I told them. Something's down there, a whole other world, and the missing people might be trapped in it. You can't go alone, Mark said, looking worried. It's too dangerous. Old George leaned forward in his chair, his hands shaking. The lighthouse, he said quietly. There's something you need to know about it. It's not just a regular lighthouse, it's a doorkeeper. We all turned to look at him. George had never shared this secret before. The light doesn't just warn boats, he continued. It keeps things from crossing over, but it's failing now. That's why they're coming back. That's why the mist walkers can walk through. Just then Lisa, who was looking out the window, gasped. The water, it's moving up. We rushed outside. What we saw made no sense. Streams of lake water were flowing upward, like rain in reverse. The fog was thick, forming weird shapes in the air. Dr. Yang's machine started beeping like crazy. These readings, the water's changing its basic nature. It's becoming something else. Suddenly we heard screams from the public beach. 3 divers, who had been searching for the missing people, were in trouble. The water around them had turned to crystal, trapping them inside like bugs in amber. We have to help them. I started running toward the beach, but Mark grabbed my arm. Wait, he said. Look. The crystal was spreading, making beautiful but scary patterns. Inside, the divers weren't moving, but they looked peaceful, like they were sleeping. Old George's voice was urgent. The lighthouse ritual, it must be done tonight. During the dark moon. It's our only chance to close the doorway. What ritual? I asked. But before he could answer, something huge moved under the lake's surface. The water bulged up, and we saw them. Dozens of misty figures walking on the water, heading toward shore. Leading them was the figure with Michael's face. Kate. The voice echoed across the water. True. The city needs you. We all need you. Dr. Yang's equipment sparked and died. The fog grew thicker, and the crystal formations began to sing, a strange, beautiful sound that made my head spin. Tonight, I said, watching the mist walkers approach. We do the ritual tonight. But first, I need to get ready for a dive. Whatever's down there, whatever has my brother, I'm going to face it. Mark nodded. I'm coming with you. Me too, said Dr. Yang, already checking her equipment. Lisa looked scared but determined. I'll help Old George with the lighthouse. As we rushed to prepare, I looked back at the lake. The water was changing color with the emotions of the creatures in it. Mist dark blue for sadness, deep purple for fear, silver for something else. I touched the crystal in my pocket. It was warm, like it was alive. Somewhere down there was the truth about my brother.
Right.
About the mist walker. About everything. And tonight we were going to find it. As the sun started to set, we got ready for the dive. I put on my wetsuit while Dr. Yang checked our oxygen tanks. Mark looked nervous. He wasn't a trained diver like me, but he refused to stay behind. Remember, Old George said, his voice shaking, you have 3 hours before the dark moon reaches its peak. That's when I must do the lighthouse ritual. If you're not back by then, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Just before we entered the water, Lisa ran up to us. Look, she pointed at the lake. The black circles were connecting, forming a path under the water, glowing like streetlights. They're showing us the way, I whispered. We stepped into the cold water. As soon as we went under, everything changed. The water wasn't dark like it should be. Instead, it was lit up by strange, beautiful lights. Fish swam past us, their scales turned to crystal, but still alive. We followed the path of black circles deeper and deeper. Dr. Yang's waterproof camera kept clicking, recording everything. Mark stayed close to me, his eyes wide behind his diving mask. Then we saw it. A city made of crystal, glowing under the water, buildings that looked like they were made of ice, but weren't melting. Streets that seemed to float, and everywhere those misty figures moving around mice the mistwalkers. Suddenly, Mark grabbed my arm and pointed. There, in what looked like a town square, were the missing people. They were inside crystal cases, just like the divers from the beach. They looked peaceful, like they were sleeping. I started swimming toward them, but something moved in front of us. It was Michael Aya, or what looked like Michael. Up close, I could see he wasn't solid. He was made of water and mist, but his eyes were still the same. Kate, his voice somehow reached us underwater. You finally came. Dr. Young's camera flashed. The mist walkers around us moved closer. Why? I tried to ask through my diving mask. Why did you take them? We need them. Michael's voice was sad. We need their reflections, their memories, to stay real, to keep our city alive. Just then, Dr. Young's oxygen gauge started beeping. We were running low on air, but before we could start swimming up, the water around us began to move strangely. The mist walkers were creating a bubble of air around us, right there under the water. We could take our masks off and breathe. You have to understand, Michael said, now standing in front of me. That night, 20 years ago, I found this place. They made me one of them. And now, a loud boom echoed through the water. Even underwater we could see the lighthouse beam cutting through the darkness above. Old George has started the ritual, Mark said. We need to go. But the mist walkers were closing in. Michael's face looked worried. If the ritual works, the doorway will close. We'll all be trapped here. Unless, he reached out his hand to me. Stay with us, Kate. Stay with me. Help us find another way. I looked at his hand, then at the Crystal City, then at the trapped people. I had a choice to make and not much time to make it. The lighthouse beam grew stronger, cutting through the water like a sword. I looked at Michael's outstretched hand. 20 years I'd waited to see my brother again, but not like this. Not as something between human and water. We can free them, I said, pointing to the people in Crystal. That's the deal. Let them go, and I'll help you find another way. Michael's watery face showed surprise. Before he could answer, the lighthouse beam hit the Crystal City, and everything started shaking. Dr. Yang, Mark, get the people out. The crystal cases are cracking, I shouted. The mist walkers started moving frantically. Some tried to block the lighthouse beam with fog, but the light was too strong. Above us, we could hear old George's voice chanting something ancient and powerful. Kate, please. Michael's voice was desperate now. If the doorway closes, then we'll find another way. I said firmly, but not by trapping innocent people. The crystal cases were breaking open. Mark and Dr. Yang helped the confused people swim toward the surface. The Crystal City was starting to crumble. Suddenly, Dr. Yang screamed. One of the mistwalkers had grabbed her, trying to pull her into a crystal building. Mark swam to help her, but another mistwalker touched his arm, and his skin started turning to crystal. Stop! I yelled at Michael. Make them stop. Michael looked torn. Then he raised his hands, and the mistwalkers backed away. Dr. Yang broke free, but Mark's arm was already half crystal. Go, I told them. Get to the surface, I'll be right behind you. The lighthouse beam was getting brighter. The Crystal City was falling apart. Michael grabbed my hand. His touch was cold like fog. Sister, he said softly. I'm sorry. I just wanted to see you again. Tears mixed with lake water on my face. I know, but this isn't right, Michael. Let them go. Let yourself go. The water around us started swirling. Above, old George's chanting reached its peak. The lighthouse beam turned pure white. Michael's misty form started breaking apart. Kate, I love you, sister. I love you too, brother, I whispered. Then everything exploded in white light. The Crystal City shattered. I felt myself being pulled up, through the water, through the light. I woke up on the beach. Mark was beside me, his arm back to normal. Dr. Yang was checking on the rescued people. Lisa was crying and hugging everyone. Old George stood at the lighthouse door looking tired but relieved. It's done, he said. The doorway is closed. The lake was calm now. The fog was gone. But sometimes when I look at my reflection in the water, I see something different. A crystal city, peaceful now, and a misty figure waving goodbye. I still live by Echo Lake. The water still holds secrets, but they're gentler now. And sometimes, on quiet nights, I sit on my dock and talk to Michael. I know he's there, watching over the lake, not as a mistwalker anymore, but as my brother. The crystal from that night sits on my windowsill. It still glows sometimes, reminding me that there are worlds within worlds, and love can bridge them all. But that's another story.